Hello, hello, hello. This is A Lil Spooky, a podcast about things that scare us just a little bit. Things like cryptids, conspiracies, or when your dog wakes you up from a very deep sleep, but then you realize you don't have a dog. My name is Everett.
And I'm Colleen.
How you doing?
I'm doing good.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, more of a point I want to make.
Oh, God. Okay.
So Shrek is an ogre, right?
Right.
Don't you think it's a little convenient that Princess Fiona's curse turns her into an ogre as well? Like they're just a match made in heaven? Why wasn't she turned into like a werewolf or like a slime monster or something?
Would you have watched that movie?
I'm just saying it's a little convenient. That's all. Something that's been bothering me all day.
I have an actual question for you. On average, how many times a day do you think about Shrek?
Well, today too many, but on average,
What is it that spurs your normal Shrek-related thoughts?
maybe I'll hear Smash Mouth in passing, or I don't know, have a big blob of earwax I need to get out. That makes me think of Shrek.
All right. God,
I'd say at least
gross.
twice a day. That's it.
Okay. I wonder if there's a statistic out there that's like, on average, men think about Shrek every 8 seconds.
Yeah.
Shreksy.
Sorry. Well, what are we talking about today, Colleen?
Today, we are venturing into the realms of the creepypasta. Creepypasto.
I like it. I like creepypasta.
Yes. This creepypasta is spooky. It's creepy.
I hope so.
It's kooky and ooky. But there's a backstory behind it or a history to it that is not what I expected.
Okay.
Have you heard of the Smiling Man?
Yes.
Okay,
That's an older one.
Yes, it's a very popular creepypasta.
Yeah. That's like at the height of like popularity of creepypastas, I feel like right around like 2012, 2013.
Yes. Yeah, and actually I'm bad. I did not look at what year this was
well,
written.
yeah, I feel like it was from that time though.
It was written for Reddit by user Blue Tidal.
Title like
Tidal.
Oh, okay.
So Blue Tidal. And it goes like this. Gather round, children. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, would go to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend that time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night and never once had a reason to feel afraid. White man privilege.
You assume he's white.
True.
He probably is.
Man privilege.
Yeah.
I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, his head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward, smile still on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time staring at him. And then he started moving towards me again. He took giant, exaggerated, tiptoed steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen, as the smiling man crept towards me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to my mind. What I meant to ask was, "What do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. But what came out was a whimper. What? That's how I imagine he said it. Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there, smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started dance-walking away. Just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off of the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see.
There's a lot to unpack from that story, I feel like.
What are your thoughts?
Well, first impression, that is just putting myself in this dude's shoes. Very creepy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the greatest reader, but...
No, it was fine. And I think it was very well written, too. I'm just saying...
I think it's a well-written short story.
Compared to a lot of other creepypastas I've heard and read.
Yes, but what is it about him that's the creepiest?
It's not supernatural or anything. So, like, this could feasibly happen.
It doesn't seem supernatural to you, the speed he was moving at?
Well, yeah, I suppose when I said that, I meant his appearance. Like, he just, the only thing that was really odd was the cartoonishly wide smile. Imagery that pops in my mind is a couple things. Spring-heeled Jack, when he was doing the long strides on his tiptoes, I get like that kind of vibe, like a Batman villain type vibe from that.
Mm-hmm.
I also am really creeped out by the fact that like he just was walking away or dancing away and then just suddenly decided, hey, I'm going to run right back at you really fast.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. And he never looked at him either. He was always looking at the sky.
Right. So how could he keep track of him? Like where he was, how could he follow him?
Just peripheral vision, but just the fact that he would never even looked at him is just looking upward or like angled upward is really weird.
Right. Well, I did a little digging into the actual writer of this story because from what I know about creepypastas, which isn't much, I don't read creepypastas that often, is they're basically just scary stories written by Reddit users.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say they're necessarily like have to be Reddit.
No,
but like a scary story on the internet.
An internet scary story, but they're not meant to be taken as truth. They're meant to be scary stories.
Right.
Well, this person, Blue Title, I do not know if he or she is man or woman.
I thought he said that he was a he in the story. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just assumed he was.
No, he never.
Oh, okay.
I'm calling him he.
Okay, sure.
But they never refer to themselves
in
any gender. There is a subreddit called R the Smiling Man, because this became such a popular creepypasta.
Yeah, it's huge.
It started to become similar to the Rake in that people started seeing the Smiling Man.
Yeah, like Slender Man and a lot of the other really
like it
popular
became
ones.
real.
Like what's that name of that creature? The thing, like, it's thought magic basically, where you can will it into existence. Yeah, tulpa. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Same thing with Slender Man too. It's like no one would have ever, like those two girls that tried to kill their friend in Wisconsin, like they never would have done that if it wasn't for the sake of the story being so popular.
Right. Yes. And I would put this sort of on par with Slender Man, essentially. But this guy, Blue Title, found that subreddit and was like, hey, I didn't know this existed. I wrote that story. Ask me whatever you want.
Yeah.
Then they asked him a bunch of questions. But according to him, this actually happened to him.
Okay.
In Seattle. And he maintains that he does not believe in the supernatural, and he doesn't think that it was a supernatural being. He just thinks there was some crazy guy.
I mean, that's kind of the vibe I got from the story too. I mean, he was very fast, but I didn't get supernatural vibes from the story.
Right. So before you read this story, had you heard of the Smiling Man? Was that a concept you were already kind of aware of?
You mean before you read it?
No, like you said you've heard of the Smiling Man before.
Yeah, when it like got really popular, like
okay, so you've only ever heard it in the context of this story.
Yeah.
You don't feel like you had heard of it before? Or it was a concept that existed before this story was written?
Creepy smile being... Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like, what's that show? Courage the Cowardly Dog. There was one of the bad guys in that show that had, like, a creepy smile. I feel like that's not a new thing.
The concept of the Smiling Man goes back decades, which I wonder if that's why this story became popular. Is it kind of people had the Smiling Man in the back of their brains, and this kind of put a story to it?
Yeah. And there's just something so unsettling about someone that is constantly smiling and won't stop smiling. Like, they're not human. It's like someone putting on a mask or something.
And that's creepy.
Yeah.
Super creepy. There's a bunch of other earlier instances of Smiling Man sightings that are not necessarily related to this story.
Okay.
But they could be.
Sure.
They could be referring to the same Smiling Man. For instance, October 16th, 1966, James Yankaitis and Martin Munov were two boys who were hanging out on Elizabeth Street in New Jersey. They were walking towards an elevated area with a wired fence when suddenly they saw a very tall, lanky, humanoid figure looking at them through the fence.
Okay.
As they walked towards him, they started to feel like an intense sense of fear for no reason other than strange man staring at them. They realized that he had a weird, creepy, cartoonish smile, a dark tan, little round beady eyes, and a sparkling green coverall outfit with a black belt around his waist. And they did not stick around to see anymore. They ran away. They don't remember him having hair. They don't remember him having a nose or ears. That could also be because they only got a quick glance at him.
Right. So basically what that means is they're just not like distinguishable features.
Right.
Like, it's not saying he didn't have ears or a nose.
They're saying he may or may not have.
Right. It's just they didn't notice them in the quick encounter.
Right. He did not seem to chase them. He just kind of leered at them menacingly. And that night in New Jersey, there were several reported UFO sightings.
Interesting. What year was this?
1966.
Isn't that the same year as Mothman?
Yes. Yes, it is. And we will get into that as well.
Okay.
We don't get too far into Mothman in this. It's kind of an interesting coincidence that they would occur the same time in the same place.
I feel like all across the country, but especially in like the East and Northeast, there was just that 5-year period. It's just like constant cryptid and UFO stuff happening.
Yeah. Anyways, around that year, there were more sightings of that same figure. One family saw him when they were out and about. One girl woke up and saw him at the end of her bed.
Like the Rake.
Yep. Yes. A lot like the Rake. And all of these happened, again, like right before Mothman. So they got buried in the news. I mean, like they were news at the time, but like...
Yeah, Mothman was huge news, especially locally in the like that area of the country, I'm sure.
Yes. Right. So you remember an image that went along with the Smiling Man story I read at the beginning.
Yep.
Can you describe it?
Yeah, the one thing I definitely thought of when you told this story from 66, the main difference was the beady eyes versus the large eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember in that picture, didn't he have really big eyes and then the big smile?
Yeah, so the picture that usually turns up in tandem with that creepypasta is it's a drawing of a man. He kind of has like a, what do you call that? Ducktail, like Danny Zuko style,
Sure.
like hair pushed back.
Yep.
Super creepy, abnormally wide ear to ear smile.
Right, yep.
It looks a lot like a drawing from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. If you ask me.
Yes, I am now looking at it.
And
yeah, I forgot what this picture looked like, but now I'm looking at it again.
Yes, and I will post this picture on our social medias just so you can obviously see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the listener beware. This is a very creepy picture, so if it pops up on your like Twitter feed or something, don't be alarmed.
Yes, but the reason I brought that picture up is because that image is actually a distorted version of a drawing created by the man who claims to have met and seen and been in contact with the real Smiling Man.
Mm-hmm.
This encounter took place 1 month after those two boys in New Jersey encountered what they called the Smiling Man.
Okay, where?
This took place in West Virginia.
West Virginia, Mothman country.
Exactly. So this is a very long and specific story. And this man gave like a deposition about it and
to like a court? Like
to an investigator.
Oh, okay.
And a book was written about it. That was the entire word for word what he said and how he said it was written down in this book that I read.
Okay.
So,
and when you say investigator, like for the police, like a private investigator?
Just a paranormal investigator, but a famous one.
Okay.
He was famous for investigating Mothman as well. So
interesting.
You may know him because you're a Mothman stan. Here's how the story of the encounter with the real Smiling Man went. It was cold and rainy around 7 p.m. on the evening of November 2nd, 1966. A salesman named Woodrow Derenberger drove his Ford Econovan down I-77 from Marietta, Ohio to his home in Mineral Wells, West Virginia. There was a car behind him that was indicating that they needed to pass him.
Like flashing lights at him or something?
Yep. So Woody just kept on driving straight and he let the car pass. But what he didn't originally see was that right behind that car, when he looked out his rearview mirror, there was a giant, shiny, dark gray ship that was about 50 feet long and somewhere between 12 and 20 feet tall at its tallest point, which is an interesting, I mean, that's an 8-foot difference, but.
Yeah. So based on those dimensions, it's probably like not saucer shaped, but more like the cigar shaped type craft that was.
No, he describes it actually as flared out at both ends. And then it comes into like a small neck. And then there's a big bulge in the middle, like a TIE fighter.
Oh, okay.
So like basically 2 wings with a ball in them, like a snitch.
Yeah. Well, sure. Yeah. So it's like whoever's driving this craft is most likely in that ball.
Yes. And he specifically describes it as a kerosene lamp chimney. But like, who knows what that actually means.
It's a TIE fighter.
Right. It's a TIE fighter. So this ship pulls out right in front of him and it swings across the interstate to cut him off. And obviously he slams on the brakes. He skids to a stop 10 feet away from this craft.
Why is it driving on the road if it's flying? Why is it cutting people off?
I'm not sure. Look, I wasn't there.
No, I know. I'm just saying in general, like what a dick that the alien was. Right.
Well, as he's sitting in his car, like probably hyperventilating, I almost died. And what is going on? Yeah. A man steps out, like a human looking man steps out of this ship. Now, this man was around 5'10 or 5'11, about 185 pounds. So like average guy. Yeah. He had extremely dark, thick hair combed back over his head, kind of like in a 1950s ducktail style, Danny Zuko sort of look, and was described as having a very good tan.
Mm-hmm.
So
Suave.
Yes, but here's the thing. The man that those 2 boys described, they described him, I believe, closer to 6 feet, which 5'11".
An inch.
An inch or so. But they described him as bald. But he did have a very good tan.
That's right.
In both instances.
And he was wearing a green, whatever you said,
and he was wearing a green jumpsuit. Now, Blue Title went into a description of this smiling man that he saw, and he describes him as a middle-aged man between 6'2" and 6'5" with thick dark hair and an old-fashioned suit. Old-fashioned meaning like 50s, not like Victorian style.
Right, yeah.
And he had relatively narrow facial features. So you can see there's similarities. There's differences, for sure.
I don't see much similarity between the Smiling Man Creepypasta version versus the other two guys.
Tall, lanky.
I mean, I wouldn't say 5'11" or 6 foot is tall. That's closer to average versus 6'5".
Well, now, but in the 60s.
Well, I know, but versus 6'5", that's a huge difference.
Yes, yep. I guess I was just thinking it's the smile, the
of course, the smile.
And the hair, the dark hair. There's similarities between the three of them. Maybe they're not all similar to each other, but like pairs of them have similarities.
Yeah.
Anyways, back to Woody Derenberger. The alien, let's call him an alien.
Okay.
The alien walks out of the ship and he walks towards Woody's car. And he has a very wide, abnormally large, off-putting smile that never goes away. Just a blank stare with a wide smile. And that is the drawing.
The original drawing.
Sorry. That image is what Woody based his drawing on, the original drawing. And that drawing is what was distorted and connected with the creepypasta.
Okay. And I'm sorry if I missed it, and I don't know if it's even important, but in this encounter, what was he wearing?
He was wearing a blue shiny jumpsuit, similar to the
two boys.
Yes. Same with the belt around the middle, but it's blue. But same like shiny material.
And there's also a belt around the middle, you said?
I believe so. I don't actually have that written down, but I do remember reading that in the deposition.
Okay.
So my details may be off, but it was a
very similar,
shiny, like not a material you would generally see people wearing clothes out of.
Yeah.
So this creepy, smiling, blank-faced guy stands outside of Woody Derenberger's car window and telepathically speaks to him, staring him in the eyes with this wide smile, not saying a single word, but he can hear in his head.
Like in a previous episode, the brains, the Palos Verdes or whatever.
Only it's creepier because this guy looks like a human.
Yeah, he's staring
smiling
at him.
And staring at you. So this man tells Woody that his name is Indrid Cold, and he's a searcher from the planet Lanulos. He asks Woody a bunch of innocuous questions about, like, what's his name? What city are we in? What do people do here? You know, kind of like...
What do you do here for fun?
Well, no, more of like what...
Yeah, no.
What is the point?
Yeah, what do you do as a race or...
Right, essentially, it seemed like this guy had never been on Earth before and was just curious about what's going on. Woody obviously seemed terrified, as we would all be. So Indrid Cold said, quote, "Mr. Derenberger, I am the same as you are. I eat, sleep, even breathe as you do." They talked a few more minutes about like random innocuous stuff, and then Indrid told Woody to go to the local authorities and report this event. And then he looked at Woody and he said, "We will meet again." Mm-hmm. And then he got in his ship and went straight up. Also similar to the brains.
Yeah, we're like, well, meet again. Yeah,
yes, why can't they just air all their shit out at once? I don't understand why there have to be multiple meetings.
That's true.
Stop wasting my time with this boring bullshit and get to the point of your message. This is like a meeting I had at work today. Total waste of time. Could have written it in an email. Anyways, after this encounter, Woody is freaked out and he races home. His wife notices something is wrong and she says, "Sit down, tell me what happened." So Woody tells her the entire story, word for word. She's probably skeptical.
Yeah.
And is like, "You're probably just tired. Something
drunk
happened."
Or
she knew,
something.
Right. She knew there was clearly something wrong because he wasn't his normal self. Something had clearly happened. So they called the police, as Indrid told them to do. And when they're done relating the story to the police, instead of getting laughed at, as I would assume they would, the police said, don't worry about it, because we've received 2 other reports of the exact same thing happening to 2 different people tonight.
Mm-hmm.
What?
When they mean encounters with him too, and not just encounters with the craft?
Well, one family was a woman and 2 kids. They were driving in a car immediately behind Woody.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And they saw the ship in the air.
Okay, so they corroborated his
Yes,
story.
and then there was a kid driving on the same highway, like around the same time, and he saw the ship hovering above him, and the ship actually beamed a light onto his car. Then 2 truck drivers were stopped in the exact same way Woody was. So they had
so they actually encountered him.
Yep.
Okay.
So once word gets out about his story and the fact that it was kind of corroborated by other people, Woody becomes like something of a local celebrity. I mean, This is West Virginia in 1966.
Everyone's obsessed with Mothman and all the other stuff that's happening too.
Yeah. So people would go interview him. They camped out on his lawn. He was a major celebrity. People were coming to his house at all hours to ask him to tell the story. And
weird. It's almost like he's a prophet or something.
Yes, that's what he made it sound like in his.
Yeah.
I'm calling it a deposition. I'm not sure what the right word
is. His tale.
Right. So 2 days after this encounter, on November 4th, Indrid Cold contacts him again.
I keep wanting him to be Indrid Cole.
No,
for some.
Cold,
I know.
chili.
I know, but it just sounds weird saying Indrid Cold.
I know. Ds. And it's a strange name.
Yeah. Very alien.
Yes, but also not. It sounds.
He used a name generator or something.
Or in any language, it would sound like a foreign name. To me, this kind of sounds like a Norwegian. Somebody tried to come up with a Norwegian name.
Yeah.
or something. Anyways, he contacts Woody telepathically again 2 days later.
Okay.
And over the course of time, several weeks, months, they either meet in person or telepathically a lot, all the time.
Interesting. So there's not a issue with distance. They can talk telepathically even when Indrid is not there.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
So over the course of all of these meetings, Indrid basically tells Woody the whole history of his existence, Indrid's existence.
Right.
He tells Woody that there's a planet called Lanulos in the galaxy of Ganymede. He says their planet is pretty much the exact same as Earth, and he even took samples of the water and vegetation to compare with Lanulos, and with a few exceptions, they're exactly the same. It doesn't say what the exceptions are. I imagine they're not important.
Right.
Apparently. Basically, it's another Earth in another galaxy. The only reason that Lanulos has spaceship technology and Earth does not is because the people of Lanulos have been spending more time learning space technology than Earth people have.
So we need to get a move on with Space Force.
Essentially, yes. We've been spending time on other stuff.
Yeah.
Lanulos has 3 seasons.
Interesting.
Planting, harvesting, and cold.
Mm.
And the people of Lanulos have a life expectancy of around 175 Earth years. Eventually, Indrid Cold and a couple of the people that also work on his ship or were on his ship, a couple aliens that were also on his ship, allow Woody to enter the ship. And he goes through a decontamination process. They gave him some kind of shot. They made him take some kind of antibacterial shower. And then they brought him to Lanulos. And honestly, yes, I want to point out he gave no timeline in how long it actually took to get there.
Yeah.
No, there's absolutely no timeline. But from his description, it took maybe an hour, maybe 2 or 3 hours. But it took an hour to get there. So their ship must be crazy fast.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, assuming this is real.
Right.
Of course. They must have some sort of technology to warp. Because traveling to another galaxy, even if you're moving at the speed of light, the nearest star in our galaxy to our star, I think, is 10 light years away.
Right.
So,
right.
And
that's why when I was reading this, I was like, this, something's off.
Yeah.
Then again, we're talking about spaceships. So who knows?
True.
Okay. So when they get onto the planet, they basically give them the old tour. They walk around. They show Woody around. He meets a bunch of people. And from everything that he describes, Lanulos is just a utopian nudist colony.
Nice.
According to Indrid Cold, there are no misunderstandings on Lanulos ever because everybody communicates telepathically. So all emotions can at all times be conveyed and understood without words.
I have some understanding now. That's the reason for the smile, because he doesn't know how to smile. So he had to put on a fake smile.
Right. Could be. I never even thought of that.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good point.
Mm-hmm.
Why have a face then? At all?
Gotta eat.
Yeah.
He said he has to eat and breathe.
That's a good point. I'm going to take that dumb sentence back. Apparently, according to Indrid Cold, Earth humans, also have the ability to communicate telepathically.
Obviously they do, because, what's his name, Woody? He's doing it too. With
I find it interesting, though, that Indrid would know that, given that his first encounter with Woody, he made it seem like he knew nothing about Earth and what people did and what humans were like.
Well, I think at this point in the story, Indrid couldn't make that assumption because he's already telepathically communicating with Woody.
Right. So apparently we can do this telepathic communication, but we just don't know how to relax our minds enough to allow others to truly know our thoughts.
We all have to become Buddhist monks or something to...
Right.
Do that.
So, here's where it gets, more cheesy. Lanulins do not understand the meaning of the word hate, and there have never been any wars or fighting.
Never.
Right. They're run by a confederation of planets that pretty much just sounds like the U.S. House of Representatives.
Okay.
There's no class system. Everybody who can work, works, and they pick whatever job they want, whatever job will make them happy. The government only gives you as much money as you need to survive, though.
Right.
So, you're working, but you're not making a wage. You're just getting what the government deems necessary for you to survive.
So it's like true communism.
Right. And if you need more money, you get it. They made it very clear that it's not like you're given a set amount of money and then if it's gone, it's gone. It's more of if you need money, you get money.
Right.
And everybody has the same standard of living.
Yeah. So, that's the actual end point in the Communist Manifesto.
Yes, it's a communist utopia.
Right, which is impossible. But
right. The people of Lanulos are allowed to only have 2 children to avoid overpopulation, but you are allowed to adopt as many kids as you want. So apparently they still can die in accidents and illnesses and stuff. So orphans, I guess, are a thing.
Sure.
So you can have a family however large you want, but you can only have 2 biological children.
Okay. Oh,
I'm sorry. They're called Lanulations. I said lanulins. They're Lanulations.
I like the word lanulite.
I just suppose it could be anything, really. Yeah. They have an interesting view of what people on Earth are supposed to be like. So the people of Lanulos had heard of Earth before.
Okay.
But apparently we are rumored to be like the Klingons of the universe, like a constantly...
The barbarians.
Yeah, so just constant warring clans, always fighting over stuff that doesn't need to be fought about.
I mean, there is some truth to that.
It's not completely untrue. Here's what's interesting. There are actually families from Earth on Lanulos.
What?
And they left Earth and they have houses and play tennis and stuff.
Wonder if that's where Bobby Fischer went.
Where is he?
Where'd he go?
I don't know.
Where did Bobby Fischer go?
So that's Lanulos. It's a nudist utopia. Even Woody makes a whole point in his story about how he walks around naked and it's the best thing ever. And he never had any shame or anything. He's just letting it all hang out.
So he's just a communist sympathizer.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Pretty much.
But here's where it gets interesting again. People from Lanulos are not the only aliens he encountered.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions because he said he was in a confederation of planets.
Yes.
Okay.
So there are also people from the planet Cerebus who seem to be fairly buddy-buddy with Indrid Cold. And these are what Lanulasians call humanoids. Indrid Cold tells Woody that these humanoids are the ones that people have previously had contact with. So anybody who had an alien encounter on Earth before, it's likely that the encounter they had was with a humanoid and not a person from Lanulos or any other planet.
So when he says humanoid, it's like maybe a gray or something. Someone that has humanoid features but doesn't look human.
According to Woody, because he met one of these, they look exactly like human people, but they have like wrinkly red eyes.
Red eyes?
Yes, and their hair is, quote, like pin feathers on a chicken.
Interesting.
Yep. In this society on Cerebus, if you put something down, set something down, the person who picks it up owns it. So if you're holding it, you own it, no matter what it is.
Okay. I touch it, it's mine.
That's exactly what it is. So it sounds, according to Indrid, this is like not a barbaric, but like a primitive people, and they're essentially just coming to Earth to like steal all our lunch money and stuff.
Sure. I don't think you're going to know the answer to this, but isn't Cerebus the name of like the dog that guards the gates of Hades?
I think it is.
Yeah. Is it spelled the same way?
Cerebus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So the interesting thing in this story is that Indrid Cold apparently has some kind of hold over these humanoids, because he goes to these humanoids and says, you need to leave Earth and never come back. Because essentially they're just causing mischief.
Right.
I mean, they're not there for any purpose, whereas the Lanulasians are just trying to gather data.
Okay. They're very Vulcan.
Yes, they really are. And we're like the Klingons. And the Cerebus are like the Ferengi.
I don't know what a Ferengi is.
Google it.
I was going to say they're more just like the humans of Star Trek, where they're just kind of like
neutral.
In the middle, neutral. Yeah.
They just do their thing.
They exist.
So that's essentially the whole story. There's more. I mean, he didn't just Woody didn't just get to visit Lanulos. They took him to Saturn and to Venus. That's where I shouldn't say that's where the story starts to fall apart, but
yeah, I don't think visiting either of those planets is possible.
Well, I mean, not only that, but the way he describes them is not
how they actually are.
Yes, I mean, one of them is actually just a dome upside down that people live inside. And the rings of Saturn are light reflecting from a rainbow. It's not.
So it can't go on a gas giant, and Venus is also doused with acid rain.
Yes. So, I mean, not that any of this story is particularly credible, but once he started talking about that, about planets at which we actually know what they're like, and even in the 60s, they knew what they were like.
Yeah.
That's where it starts to get a little... Interesting, yes. But that's essentially the whole story. Apparently, Woody remained in contact with Indrid Cold and his amigos for a long time, and he ended up giving talks at universities and stuff.
So that means the universities had to pay him, most likely, to come and speak.
Probably, unless he volunteered.
Maybe. Actually, that's not that hard to believe either, because those types of, what are they called? MUFON? Yeah, they're dying to spread the word.
Well, okay, towards the end of his book, he made it sound like the people from Lanulos were making more and more and more contact with humans. Like enough that it seems weird that we would never have heard of them before. Like, I assume this is the first time you've heard of Lanulos, because it was the first time I have.
Yeah, definitely.
He also, in his book, goes on a tangent about the Men in Black and how Men in Black are not aliens, but government officials whose sole job is to discredit proof of alien races in order to keep us subordinate to their money-grubbing capitalist ways.
Okay.
Eventually, I mean...
So he is a communist.
Yes, yeah.
Not that that's like
but
a bad thing, but during the Cold War, it probably would have been a bad thing.
It seems like he was your average American family man in the 1960s, and then this experience turned him on to the whole
Soviet message.
Well, I mean, honestly, if this was a thing that actually existed, I would be like down with it as well.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, for the sake of playing devil's advocate,
yes.
I mean, this is a story, and it was also during the Cold War, and this is describing, Karl Marx. So
right. Well, I mean, okay, so eventually people were like, Woody, you're an idiot. And they started like ridiculing him. He got harassing phone calls. People were trespassing on his property to like make fun of him and his family and stuff.
Aww.
He ended up having a divorce for that reason, because it was just, I think when this happened to him, he went all in. Like he was one person before the encounter, and then afterwards his entire personality and outlook on life changed. So of course he's not the same man his wife married. So there was like a bitter divorce. Kids were involved. It was sad. And he ended up actually having to move away from West Virginia because of his notoriety. Like people would just, egg his house and stuff. Even later, he said no matter where he went, he felt like the government was watching him. And he died at the age of 74 in 1990. But even with all of that shit that happened to him, he never, ever, ever denounced his story. He just stopped talking about it. I'm sure if you asked him about it, he'd tell you, but he didn't like go out of his way.
Yeah, not speaking at universities anymore.
Yes, but it's interesting because in the book, he makes a point that he will become an evangelist and he's going to spread the word of Lanulos and tell the world.
Interesting.
So he obviously had a change of heart when opinion about him shifted.
Right.
So here is where Mothman comes in.
Ooh, yeah.
It's not as exciting as you think. But Mothman, I mean, it happened same year, same area. An investigator named John Keel. That's the man who wrote this deposition down. He was investigating.
I recognize the name.
Yep, he was investigating Mothman at the time. During John Keel's investigation, Indrid Cold actually called him over the telephone. And he told John Keel, stop what you're doing, run away, because there's a disaster coming. And as John Keel was leaving wherever he was, the Silver Bridge collapsed, killing 43 people.
And I'm sorry, is this according to Woody or is this according to Keel?
John Keel.
Interesting. So he hadn't any prior contact with Indrid Cold.
No, and I'm actually not sure because John Keel did a deep dive into
Mothman.
Woody Derenberger. So I'm not sure if this occurred before or after he met Woody.
Okay.
This was just a story I read in passing.
But either way, basically the implication then is that Indrid Cold knew of the existence of Mothman or whatever race Mothman is, and that it always brings on a disaster.
Yes.
It appears to people.
Right. There's a lot of interesting bits about this story. But what actually is interesting is concept of aliens, occurring around the same place at the same time as Mothman. But this wasn't as well known.
Right.
Like, what is it about West Virginia in the 1960s became an alien magnet?
Something in the water, man. I don't know.
Anyways, that's the history of Indrid Cold, who was he was referred to as the Smiling Man in the 1960s. So whether or not Blue Title had heard of this in any way before writing his story, that's the quote unquote real Smiling Man, the original Smiling Man.
I feel like
I don't know that they're even slightly related.
Yeah,
or
other than
maybe,
the smiling thing.
As I said, the concept of the Smiling Man, I feel people don't know the story, but they've heard. There's something in the back of your mind that has heard of the Smiling Man.
So I feel like the creepypasta, I don't think it was really inspired by the story of Indrid Cold. The only similarity in the actual story is the smile. Mm-hmm. But the only other similarity that doesn't even have to do with the story is the illustration that's associated with the creepypasta is the distorted image of Indrid Cold. So other than that, I feel like he probably didn't steal the story.
I'm sure
or anything.
They had nothing to do with each
other.
other.
Just a weird coincidence.
Yes. Well, weird coincidence. I think the concept of the Smiling Man is one that kind of is in the back of everyone's mind. Like the thought of some rando smiling at you.
Yeah, it's like a primal fear.
Yes. It's just my original thought for this episode was that creepypasta. And I was like, what's the background about that? And then it turned into communist utopia,
aliens,
nudists. Yeah. But I love a good alien story.
Yeah, this one is very different from any I've ever heard.
Yes, and they didn't do tests on him. They were like, we want you to know everything about us.
Yeah, he was like a tourist guide.
Yeah. As far as sightings of the Smiling Man since then.
Sure.
We're not going to count the creepypasta. Let's just assume that's a completely separate thing. A blogger in 2009 said that he drove past a grinning man on the highway outside of Roswell, New Mexico.
Okay.
A person on Reddit has claimed to be Indrid Cold. The problem is that Indrid Cold looks so much like a human
Yeah.
that, I mean, none of these accounts really are ever going to hold water.
No.
There is a site called Trust No More that is asking people to submit any recent sightings of Indrid Cold or a smiling man that they may have had, or to keep an eye out for a tall, hairless man in a green or blue one-piece suit with a dark tan that can communicate telepathically and is seen near a UFO or watching you while you sleep. So if you come across any of those bad boys, let them know.
Wait, so the watching you in your sleep thing, where did that part come from again?
From what I read, there
That
was
was one
one
of the-
instance of it in the 60s. A
Yeah.
girl woke up to a smiling man watching her sleep.
Okay.
And to me, that's scarier than any
Yeah.
creepypasta.
Well, especially if that actually happened too.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like that's either unrelated, or if it is related, it'd be very weird because Indrid Cold isn't a menacing person or a menacing being.
Right.
So why
He's
would
like
he
the
do that?
definition of we come in peace.
Yeah. So why would he be the rake in that instance?
Right. So I don't know. I think my conclusion is Indrid Cold, interesting story, love an alien story. But the concept of a smiling stranger with a abnormal smile and crazy eyes is uniformly terrifying in any instance. And that's basically the only thing that connects any of these stories.
And the dancing part too of the creepypasta is the part that is
the
extra
insanity.
creepy too. It reminds me, sorry, just one last point about that creepypasta, because I wanted to make this at the beginning of the episode too. It reminds me in the movie It, when Pennywise does the dance at the end of the movie. It's like just a crazy thing where it's just unnatural dancing.
Well, it's unexpected.
And unexpected, yeah.
And it's taking something innocent and turning it into something ominous.
Yeah, ominous or like uncanny valley.
Yes.
Like weird. But yeah, a very, very interesting story. I've never heard that before.
What do you rate it on a scale of believability?
Unbelievability 1 for all of the scientific bullshit.
Yeah.
But for interest, I give it an 8.5.
I'm going to rate a little bit higher on believability. Most of his story, I will admit, is bullshit. What I like about it is West Virginia, aliens, Mothman, weird hotspot. That's something I'm going to need to look into. So I do believe that he witnessed or experienced some sort of supernatural or what he believed to be supernatural occurrence.
At the beginning, yes, when he came in contact with the craft. I kind of believe that too, but I don't think the traveling thing.
No, that's where you lose me. And I don't
visiting
know. I don't know if
Langelos.
maybe he's crazy or if he was making up a story for entertainment or to
Sell his book.
Yes. Well, he didn't write a book. It was
I thought you said it was in his book. Oh, the investigator
wrote a book and
so it's like his witness statement.
Yes. Yeah.
I see.
That's why I was calling it a deposition, I guess.
see. Okay.
So I don't know that he ever made money off of this at all.
Other than possibly from universities speaking at them, but maybe even not that.
Correct. So, I mean, I guess another point in his favor is
he didn't really
try
to monetize it.
Yeah, and he's not making money off of it, and actually it ruined his life in the end.
Right.
So I guess why would you do that on purpose? Like, why would you? I mean, unless you thought it would make you money. I don't know.
Maybe he genuinely believed it happened. I don't know.
Right.
Anyway, if you're finished, if you're done, Colleen, I have a listener story I would like to share.
Awesome.
So if you have the listener story for us, we will make those plugs at the end. But this listener story is from Kelsey.
Hey,
Kelsey. So this is a little bit longer, so I'm just going to read through it. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Will do.
So if you're from the northern Wisconsin or upper peninsula of Michigan area, chances are you're familiar with the Paulding light. The Paulding light is a light phenomenon visibly practically any night, driving off of Highway 45 outside of Watersmeet, Michigan. The legend states that the light is the spirit of a railroad conductor destined to remain at the location of his death, forever waving a light to serve as a warning to any visitors. All very good material for campfire stories and spooking your friends. So in high school, around 2003 or 2004, I took my first trip out to the light with a few friends of mine. We were feeling particularly adventurous, and after parking our cars, we walked up the barricade near the end of the parking area with some flashlights, and we planned to walk to the source of the light. When we arrived, we stood in the chilly evening air and thick darkness of the northern pines, staring at a faint light bobbing in the distance. None of us questioned that it was there. We'd all known people and family members who had seen it and shared their own experiences. Described as a benevolent spirit, none of us were scared, and we were all expecting to see something upon our arrival. We weren't disappointed to be welcomed almost instantly by the appearance of the light when we got out of the car. It appeared to blink in and out of focus, moving erratically in between the trees. Giddy with nervous energy and teenage bravado, my friends and I began walking through the woods, determined to find the source of the light, or at the very least get a better look at it. We walked along a well-defined path without ever seeming to get closer to the light, finally losing it completely. Cold, bored with the novelty of our trip, and not without some anxiety about being in the woods at night, my friends and I turned back. The light was visible once again, and we reached the trailhead. We all got back into the car and tore home along the road, recounting the experience and thinking it was pretty cool that we got any kind of look at the ghost light. A few months later, a family friend was in the area visiting. She is a devout Catholic who has shared stories with me about participating in exorcisms and experiences with ghosts and demons. Our discussion at one point turned to the topic of the Paulding light, and she expressed interest in visiting the area. Myself, my mother, our family friend, and her husband and son all drove out to the area discussing the story surrounding the legend. I was expecting to see the same small light far off in the distance upon our arrival. When we parked at the trailhead, the same bobbing light was visible, bouncing about in the trees. Some say the light is simply due to swamp gases or lights off of the highway shining into the trees. However, what happened when we got out of the car convinced me that the Paulding light is most definitely something supernatural. As our small group moved through the darkness, quietly chatting to each other, the light stopped moving and seemed to hang still in the air. As we reached a metal barricade between the parking lot and the forest, our family friend and her son gently grabbed one another. At that same moment, the light made a swift movement toward us and became intensely bright. I stepped backward with a small gasp, taken aback by the sudden movement. The light seemed to hang right in front of us, a large orb glowing gently until it slowly faded and receded farther back into the woods, following the power lines that cut a swath through the woods. When the light rushed towards us, I was filled with a mixture of fear and wonder. I had never felt certain before that there were forces outside of the physical world that weren't always visible to our eyes. This experience solidified it for me. My friend and her son both said that the light had the sensation of a soul or a spirit attached to it, and I feel that because of the otherworldly awareness, the light was more receptive to, and maybe even curious of our group. Very interesting.
It is interesting.
I've never heard of that before.
No, and I mean, I guess I'm from western Wisconsin.
But even so, we're kind of in the general area, and I've never heard of the Paulding light before. It's just new to me.
I'm wondering what the feeling of a soul is. She said,
yeah,
it's a feeling of a soul.
Her family friend, who was the Catholic that was part of an exorcism previously. So
right.
I guess when I hear that, I feel like it's the same sensation that someone's watching you, but maybe a little less dangerous. Like you feel someone close. Yeah. So maybe when they saw this light, they felt like it was a being instead of just a light source.
And the legend is that it's like a train conductor.
Yes.
Wonder what they're doing, just hanging out in northern Wisconsin. Still. What are they waiting for? The
spirit, you mean?
Yeah.
I assume he died an untimely death, and he's stuck. I mean, just like ghost stuff, right?
Just ghost stuff.
Well, I mean, I don't know. That story is like, it's weird because...
That is an interesting one.
Yeah, because I'm not very familiar with like orbs.
And orbs are a very common...
Yeah, like...
occurrence. And they almost always seem to be in a haunted area.
Yeah, it's like if you watch any of those ghost hunter type shows, I feel like whenever they go somewhere, they're always catching orbs on camera. Like
right.
That's one of the things that is associated with any haunted house or anything like that.
We should do an episode on orbs.
Orbs. Yeah, I mean, I don't know anything about it, so I would definitely be interested.
I've never experienced something like that. To me, I am more willing to believe in an alien thing than like a spiritual ghosty thing.
Really? I'm like the exact opposite. Because I feel like aliens have to exist, but because of how vast the universe is, I feel like it's very unlikely that they visited us. But I'm more willing to believe in like a spiritual realm, like another plane of existence.
Interesting.
And not even like an afterlife, just like kind of a energy type thing.
Yeah. I mean, I've got my own set of beliefs. I don't necessarily, like, ghosts are, it's difficult for me.
Ghosts?
Ghosts?
The thing about orbs, too, that I just want to quick say, it's so easy to say orbs are dumb because, like, it's literally a ball of light and it's not very scary. But I feel like if I was in Kelsey's shoes and I saw this, I would be very weirded out and terrified because it's like, it's definitely not like she had made the point of, too. It's definitely not like swamp gas or...
Yeah.
I don't even know what swamp gas is.
People bring up swamp gas. What are there swamps in northern Wisconsin that I'm unaware of?
Well, this was in Michigan, but...
UP?
Yeah. Well, and also, I feel like based on the story, it's very unlikely to be headlights from a car going through the trees, too, because it seemed like the light was actually interacting with them.
Yes, and I think that is kind of what lends the story credibility, is that Kelsey herself seemed to be a skeptic, like, I was a high school student, but then she clearly felt something. And whether or not that was
something, not just felt it.
Right. It's just, do you think that was because she was traveling with people who may have had stronger belief?
Yeah, what's that term where you're in like a group setting? I don't think it's like mob mentality.
No.
But like that similar thing where like you all have the same witness statement because you're more keen or more susceptible to suggestion in a group setting. I don't know. I don't think that would be the case, though, because I feel like you would see that light source right in front of you. There's no mistaking it.
Thing about orbs is usually when I read about them, it's like I saw an orb in a picture that I took. Right. And then usually I'm like, you know what? It was probably your camera.
Yeah,
or a
like
reflection
some dust
of something. But in this instance, especially since it's a well-known phenomenon, you'd think...
Supposedly, I hadn't heard about it before.
Yes, but I mean, clearly she and all of her friends in high school had heard of it. And then they were able to actually locate and see it
twice
on multiple occasions. Yeah. You'd think that would be more of a studied phenomenon. You know what I mean? Like they'd have figured it out by now.
Maybe they're trying to keep it hush-hush to not,
Kelsey, have you ever been visited by a man in black?
If we ever go to that area, I want to go there. Find it. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Road trip. Anyways, if
Kelsey, you're coming with us.
Yes, Kelsey, take us there. And any other listeners, if you have seen that light, if anybody has taken a picture of that light or had other experiences, send them on over because I would be very interested to read other instances of it.
And if you have your own personal experience unrelated to orbs, anything that has been spooky, or if you've even written a creepypasta and you would like us to read it, send it over as long as it's not too long. I want to keep it a little short at the end of our episodes. You can send us a DM on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. All of those are at NerdSlothHQ. Or if you would prefer to email, the email address is contact@nerdsloth.com.
And I hope you enjoyed this story about the Smiling Man, even though it went in several different directions.
All of this was very new to me, though. I only knew about the creepypasta. I didn't know about Indrid Cold. I didn't know about the Paulding Light.
Yeah.
New stuff.
You learned something new. Anyways, thanks, guys. Thanks for listening to us. Thanks for getting a little spooky.
And I'm hosting next week, and it's going to be Teaser, a absolutely true story. All right. Well, we love y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Presented by NerdSloth,
a place for lazy nerds.
If you like what you heard, consider donating at patreon.com/nerdsloth so we can continue bringing you quality shows. Be sure to also leave us a review and share your favorite episodes and clips on social media. If you're looking for more content, visit us at nerdsloth.com.